Muy bien, pues después de la intervención de Isabel Balsamó, tenemos con nosotros a Nick McDowell, que es director del área internacional y de Londres del Arts Council de Inglaterra. El modelo del Arts Council inglés, en fin, o británico, porque las dos cosas hay. Nick McDowell pertenece al Arts Council de Inglaterra, pero existe el Arts Council británico. Es un modelo distinto al del Ministerio de Cultura establecido por primera vez en Francia. Es un modelo muy interesante al que también tenemos que prestar atención. Y Nick McDowell nos lo puede explicar mejor que nadie, porque ha sido responsable en distintas posiciones en este modelo de administración cultural. Empezó su carrera en el Arts Council en el año 2000 como director de literatura para Londres y ahora dirige un equipo que invierte en programas de arte, literatura, festivales y centros de las artes. Él ha estado dedicado al mundo de la cultura desde el principio de su carrera, ha tenido una actividad editorial, formando parte de compañías tan importantes como Macmillan y Picador. Él también es autor de libros de ficción y de no ficción y, por tanto, es una personalidad extraordinariamente interesante y competente y me alegro mucho de tenerle hoy con nosotros y le doy la bienvenida.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to the Ministry on your 100th anniversary. In England, when you reach your 100th birthday, the Queen sends you a letter of congratulation. I could not persuade her to give me one for you. I apologize. The Arts Council is a bit younger than you. We're only 70. We're 70 next year. Describing the great Anglophile Spanish novelist Javier Marías, his English translator, Margaret Hull Costa, has remarked that Javier Marías is like Picasso, who said he used to take a line for a walk. Javier takes a thought for a walk. In a way, they're very philosophical novels that he writes, and that's quite alien to the English reader. We don't like to be made to think. So, despite my total inability to speak or read Spanish, for which I apologize, I am an admirer of Javier Marías, and I have been made to think quite hard in preparing to speak to you today. So thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be at this august symposium and have the opportunity to talk to you about Arts Council England and make one or two observations about the Anglo-Saxon model of arts funding. Wherever you go in the world, you discover yet another new arrangement by which public subsidy reaches artists, arts organizations, and museums. Sometimes the money comes straight from the Treasury, sometimes from the Ministry of Culture, sometimes the Ministry of Culture funds all aspects of arts and culture centrally, sometimes much of the money is delegated to regional bodies, or, as in the case of England, to a non-departmental public body, Arts Council England. However, in England, the major national museums, the National Gallery, the Tate, the Victoria and Albert, are funded directly by the Ministry for Culture, Media and Sport. Arts Council England, along with similar bodies in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, receives funding from the DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and from the National Lottery to distribute to artists, arts organisations, cultural education entities and non-national museums. We also now have a strategic role in library development, although we are not responsible for the funding of libraries. But the Arts Council is more than a funder. Our role is threefold. Firstly, we allocate public subsidy to arts and culture against a published strategy. Secondly, we are a talent development agency committed to increasing the resilience of arts organisations and growing audiences. Thirdly, we are advocates for the value of arts and culture and their wider impact across education, the economy, health, social cohesion, and creative industries export. Our 10-year strategy, launched in 2010 and refreshed last year, is great art and culture for everyone. We have 5 strategic goals. First, Excellence is thriving and celebrated in arts museums and libraries. Here the focus is on talent development, making the creative case for diversity and international collaboration and exchange. Second, everyone has the opportunity to experience and be inspired by arts museums and libraries. This is about depth and frequency of engagement with the arts by citizens, about audience development and making the most of the digital opportunity. Third, arts museums and libraries are economically resilient and environmentally sustainable. As I will describe later, we want organizations to be adaptable, increasing earned and contributed income, working better in local authority partnerships, and being sensitive to the environmental impact of their activities. Fourth, the leadership and the workforce of arts museums and libraries are diverse and appropriately skilled. And fifth, and perhaps most importantly, every child and young person has the opportunity to experience the richness of arts and museums and libraries. This is fundamental. Children are the artists and the audiences of tomorrow. Our new Chief Executive, Darren Henley, recently announced our ambition to develop a 25-year talent development plan to nurture a whole generation. So the Arts Council is sponsored by the Department for Media, Culture and Sport, but we sit at arm's length from government. The arm's length principle creates a distance between government policy and the arts sector. This can protect artists and arts audiences from what they might see as government interference, and at the same time it protects politicians from direct lobbying by arts organisations. This is a key feature of the Anglo-Saxon model. A former French Minister for Culture remarked some years ago that while the French have a separation between church and state, they would not consider a separation between state and culture as the English do. The distance from government perhaps goes some way to accounting for the mixed model of arts funding in England and the rest of the UK, which I will come to in a few minutes. But first, a brief history. The Arts Council was founded in 1946 by the economist John Maynard Keynes. As the Council's first chair, Keynes used his influence in government to secure a high level of funding, established the principle of arm's length between UK arts policy and the government of the day. The Arts Council of Great Britain was divided in 1994 to form Arts Council England, Scottish Arts Council of Wales. At the same time, the National Lottery was established and the Arts Council of England became one of its distribution bodies. The Arts Council held national sway and worked in collaboration with 10 autonomous regional arts boards. In 2002, these organisations were merged into a single organisation, Arts Council England, combining national impact and influence with government on the one hand and regional representation across the country on the other. With the breakup of yet another agency, the Museums, Library and Archive Council, Arts Council England took on responsibility in 2011 for the strategic development of the library network and the funding and development of non-national museums. In 2012, we took on responsibility for funding and developing music education from our Department of Education. Arts Council England has seen its revenues from government fall dramatically, by 40% in fact, since 2011. I realise I've been forgetting to show you slides as we go along, but I wanted to show you some of the things that we fund in the fine arts. These are just a few of them. We'll catch up a little bit. There's the Hayward Gallery, the London Festival of Architecture, the Serpentine Pavilion, and so on. I will stop there at Tate Modern. Okay. The impact of these fairly dramatic cuts, 40% since 2011, has been softened by funding from the National Lottery holding more or less steady. However, local authorities, still the biggest funders of the arts in England, have also seen their budgets slashed over the last 5 years, with a particular impact outside London. More cuts to our grant and aid from taxation are forecast for the next 3 years, and we expect that the amount of money we receive from the government to be exceeded by lottery income at some point in the next 2 years, not because lottery funding has grown, but because government subsidy has fallen so far. The problem with this arrangement is that there is no planning certainty for lottery funding. Lottery receipts follow an irregular pattern determined by how many people are buying lottery tickets in any given month. The government grant in aid is allocated in 3-year cycles and is a more reliable source of funding, enabling us to offer grants over longer periods to organisations. This allows them to plan properly, setting budgets, being artistically ambitious, and managing risk in a much more strategic way. In 2012 to 13, Arts Council invested about €125 million in arts and culture. When we allocate our money, the largest sums go as 3-year core funding to 700 arts organisations and museums. In 2013, we invested €426 million in arts organisations and €58 million in museums. Almost all the funds deployed in this way were government grant in aid. And remember that the national museums like the Tate, the British Museum, the V&A and 13 others are funded directly by the government to the tune of another €615 million. Alongside these major investments, we made we made €95 million of lottery money available in project grants by open application to artists and organisations across England. We spent €165 million of lottery funding on strategic programmes, which included touring, the Museum's Resilience Fund, and the Creative People and Places programme, which is designed to increase production and participation in hard-to-reach areas of England. Smaller sums were spent on cultural education and library development. Our role in library development is not dissimilar to the one which my French friend described. The physical spaces of libraries are owned and funded by local government. However, we are committed to library development and to a coherent cultural offer across libraries, museums, and the arts. And one of our current initiatives will see free Wi-Fi roll out across England's libraries. So about 12% of our funding goes to the visual arts and 7% to the non-national museums we fund. So very approximately, one might say that 20% of our funding is in the field of fine arts, while 22% goes to theatre and 26% to music and music education. Opera and ballet, in the form of major institutions like the Royal Opera House, English National Ballet and Opera North, command major subsidies. 20% of the organisations we support receive 80% of the money we give out. In this era of recession and deficit reduction, it has been much harder to strike a good balance between bringing in new organisations and making sure that more established galleries and companies can survive. In the field of fine arts, some of the major exhibition spaces like the Hayward, the Whitechapel and the Serpentine in London and Yorkshire Sculpture Park in the north are funded by the Arts Council, while others like the Tate receive subsidy direct from government. Arts Council funding in the visual arts focuses on contemporary work, nurturing the talent of artists as they develop and bringing work by living artists to new audiences. The slides I'm showing you are of work made or exhibited with Arts Council support. In 2001, Chris Smith, now Lord Smith, became our first Secretary of State for Culture. He revolutionised public engagement by making England's national museums free to enter. I should say, by the way, that I went to the Goya, to the Prado and saw the Goyas free to enter in Spain. So I know that we're not alone in England in doing this. But Chris Smith revolutionised engagement by making the museums free. Visitor figures increased by 150% over the following decade, with the result that over half of English adults visit a museum or a gallery in any given year, and the quality and accessibility of places like the British Museum, the Tate Modern, and the V&A have proved major cultural tourist destinations from visitors from all over the world. The whole museum sector has a major impact on local and national economies. With continued support from local authorities, the Ministry, and other public and private funders, museums play an ever more important role in our economy and communities. A recent report examined the economic impact of museums in England and found that the museums sector generates €3.6 billion in income, contributes €2 billion in economic output to the national economy, employs about 30,000 people, is sited across 2,500 organisations, and it's estimated that it generates £3 of income for every pound of public subsidy. As well as their significant impact on tourism, museums shape a sense of place and identity for citizens and generate measurable well-being and a sense of community. So I now turn to the Anglo-Saxon model of funding. There is, as you will know, a broad spectrum of approaches to arts funding which stretches from America at one extreme to some of the mainland European models on the other. In America, state and federal funding for the arts plays a minimal role. The National Endowment for the Arts receives about 0.25% of the non-defense budget for the states, about $146 million or 128 million euros each year, which equates to about a third of a euro per citizen. Foundations endowed by individuals, however, like the Getty Foundation or the Mellon Foundation, patrons, individual giving and corporate sponsorship make up the vast majority of funding for the arts. At the other end of the spectrum are those European countries which provide state subsidy to the arts at a much higher percentage of GDP on the principle that it is primarily the role of the state to support a group of arts organizations to provide a comprehensive cultural offer to citizens. In the year 2000, the Franco-British Society published a report comparing arts funding and investment in Britain and France. At that point, France was spending roughly twice as much public subsidy on the arts as Britain. In 2013, French subsidy to culture was about 3.5 billion euros. The English model, as operated by Arts Council England, falls somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Public subsidy to arts and culture is about 1.4 billion euros per year from central government. In England, we encourage arts organisations and museums to develop business models which combine public subsidy, earned income, and a mix of income from other sources like trusts, foundations, individual giving, corporate sponsorship, and international co-commissions. We talk about this approach using the metaphor of the three-legged stool. As long as each of the legs, public subsidy, earned income, and other funding, is in place, the stool will stand. But take one leg away, and the stool falls over. As mentioned when I talked about our 10-year strategy, the third of our 5 goals is focused on financial resilience. We have found that a balance between public subsidy at around a third of income, earned income at around a third, and the final third coming from trusts, foundations, and individual giving has helped most of our organisations to survive and continue to make art and find audiences during the period of austerity and debt reduction since 2010. But let's go back a little to the golden age of lottery. In the decade from 1994, arts and culture enjoyed increases in government subsidy from a new Labour government committed to the arts as both good in themselves, having intrinsic value, and as instruments of social change. Cultural education, social inclusion, and a refreshed emphasis on equality and diversity came with these increases in funding. During 1994 to 1998, with the setting up of a national lottery with distribution to a number of good causes, including the arts, hundreds of millions of pounds were made available for the renovation of iconic cultural buildings like the Royal Opera House in London and the construction of a cluster of new galleries, theatres and concert halls from Tate Modern in London to the Sage for music and the Baltic for visual arts in Newcastle Gateshead. Many of these buildings have been fantastic successes. Turner Contemporary, a new visual arts space in Margate on the south coast of England, is an example of capital investment in the arts acting as a catalyst to the wider regeneration of an otherwise depressed town. Margate also happens to be the birthplace of the artist Tracy Emin. Managing the investment of lottery money in the arts has brought with it a different structure of accountability. While distributing government grant and aid from taxpayers' money requires a high degree of transparency, the citizens of England feel a greater sense of ownership of the surpluses created by their mostly unsuccessful buying of lottery tickets. Most English citizens accept the notion that paying taxes is a fair price for the provision of healthcare, education, defence, and some culture. Lottery is somehow different. No one is compelled, except perhaps by a gambling compulsion, to play the lottery. And so citizens feel they have a bigger stake in what happens to the money which they have chosen to lose. As a consequence, the public feels a strong sense of civic pride about the new buildings which have been constructed with lottery funds. In some rare cases, when projects funded by the lottery have failed, the public's dismay and outrage has been noticeably stronger. There are three principles which determine the distribution of lottery funding to the arts. Public benefit first. Second, additionality. Lottery projects must create new opportunities, new work, new experiences for audiences. And third, funds should be made available by open application. Anybody can apply for them. From 2010, the economic downturn, coupled with a new government, heralded a period of sharp cuts to arts and culture funding in England. Alongside these reductions in subsidy, the Department for Culture asked the Arts Council to find ways of stimulating private giving, a strong encouragement to move arts funding in England much closer to the American model than it had ever been before. As a result, in 2012, we opened the Catalyst programme. Catalyst is a £70 million programme introduced to support philanthropy for the arts and culture sector. Over 400 organisations were selected to either establish an endowment or build capacity to fundraise for new money, which was matched by Arts Council funds, or to encourage organisations to work together to fundraise and build capacity and skills. The first Catalyst evaluation report shows some significant successes. Some organisations have increased their income from private giving, and others have developed their fundraising skills. Building on the learning from this programme, we will invest more in fundraising and philanthropy and have earmarked nearly €30 million for a similar intervention in 2016. We learned that 85% of organisations in the programme have piloted fundraising methods new to their organisations. Before participating in Catalyst, more than a quarter of organisations had no fundraising strategy in place at all, and this figure has dropped down to 5%. 88% of organisations are identifying and approaching new donors. However, around 18% of organisations reported that Catalyst hadn't helped them make improvements to their fundraising strategy at all, indicating that there is a limit to the number of private and corporate donors to the arts and to the appetite for change amongst arts organisations. As a result of cuts to public subsidy, the introduction of Catalyst, and a developing entrepreneurial spirit in the arts sector, the balance of the three-legged stool has tilted. In 2010 to 11, organisations relied on subsidy for 32% of their revenues and made 47% in earned income, leaving around 21% from elsewhere, including local authorities, philanthropic giving, trusts and foundations. 2 years later, reliance on subsidy had fallen from 32 to 27%, with earned income rising from 47 to 52%, and donations staying steady at 21%. So that shows a reduction in public subsidy and the money being found again from other sources. But another way of interpreting this information is to notice that the Arts Council investment of €820 million generates a further 2.7 billion of euros in revenue into arts organisations, with all the jobs and economic activity which follow. The publicly subsidised arts and culture sector is an important part of the wider creative industries in England. While the arts don't generate income on the scale of film or fashion, the publicly subsidised arts sector is the incubator for artists and producers, some of whom go on to critical and commercial success, as did Steve McQueen, the artist-turned-film director, winning an Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, or Danny Boyle, who started in the subsidised theatre sector and eventually directed the opening ceremony of the 2012 Olympic Games. In another example, the Tony Awards in New York earlier this month, about half the awards went to British actors and productions, most notably the curious incident of The Dog in the Nighttime, a play developed at the National Theatre in London with public subsidy. The play has gone on for commercial success on Broadway and hence contributed to the financial resilience of our theatre sector and reminded our politicians of the power the arts have to build the creative economy. We're now working more closely with UK Trade and Investment, a government body which seeks to stimulate international commercial opportunities across all industries, including the creative industries, from music promotion and film production to the international touring of museum shows. International collaboration, touring, exchanges, co-commissioning, plays an important role in talent development and the cultivation of excellence, but it also helps many of our organisations to develop more resilient business models and contribute to the creative industry's export agenda. Our symphony orchestras tour the world. The London Symphony Orchestra was recently in China, and with the income they generate overseas, they can afford to pay their players and give less well-paid performances outside London. The same is true of contemporary choreography-led companies like Akram Khan and Hofer Schechter. In the wake of our successful Cultural Olympiad in 2012, Arts Council England has been working more closely with our partners, the British Council. The British Council has 100 offices across the world with arts managers in each. We are working together to foster collaborations between artists in England and abroad, to showcase the best of British arts and culture in other countries, and to bring the best work from abroad to English audiences. Sometimes we work together on particular countries of focus, recently on a project called Transform Brazil, and over the coming 2 years on Reimagine India, which supports collaboration and exchange with that country. In 2017 to 18, we hope to work with the British Council on collaborations in East Asia, specifically Japan and Korea. A number of these international initiatives involve collaboration with Spanish artists, producers and makers. The English theatre company Improbable worked with the Teatro Real in Madrid to stage Philip Glass's opera about Walt Disney, The Perfect American, a production which went on to be staged at English National Opera in London and then the Brisbane Festival in Australia. Aerowaves, a pan-European network of dance agencies, includes many collaborations with Spanish organisations and performances at the Mercat dos Flors in Barcelona. In Birmingham, the Bee Festival has a strand devoted to Spanish work, and again in the Midlands there has been a focus on contemporary flamenco choreography in collaboration with Jesus Fernandez, renowned flamenco choreographer and dancer. So this mixed model of funding, the three-legged stool, which I have been describing, has a number of advantages. It spreads risk for arts organisations across a number of different income streams, subsidy, box office, donations, and it helps us make the case to the government for the economic benefits of investing public funding in the arts. Every pound sterling invested by the Arts Council generated £6 for the local economy. 7,000 cultural businesses contribute 38 billion euros each year to the economy. Jobs in the cultural sector and the wider creative industries are expected to rise by a third by 2020, and the 700 organisations that we regularly fund employ 70,000 people. In the current climate, these numbers help us to make the case for the smallest possible cuts. While an in-year cut announced in July will reduce the Department for Culture, Media and Sports budgets by 2.5%, only 0.35 of that cut will be passed on to Arts Council England. In the context, that's success. So we will be continuing to diversify arts funding, and perhaps it's no surprise in this economically charged and financially competitive environment that Arts Council England is brilliantly chaired by Peter Bazalgette, a man whose cultural credentials are matched by his commercial success in television, and has as its new chief executive, Darren Henley, a passionate advocate for cultural education, who joined us from the highly successful commercial radio station Classic FM, where he had been managing director. These leaders understand and embrace high culture, while at the same time bringing valuable experiences of the commercial world. As part of our continuing commitment to diversifying funding for the arts, we have just opened the Arts Impact Fund, a loan scheme for arts organisations with an emphasis on a social return on investment. The scheme is financed by Bank of America Merrill Lynch, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, the National Endowment for Arts, Sciences, Technology and the Arts, and the Arts Council England. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with the words of our chair, Sir Peter Bazalgette. While it's entirely healthy that the arts should diversify its funding revenue, we currently have a pressing need to continue to make the best possible case to government for the maintenance of public funding in an era of austerity. We'll be stressing the value delivered for the creative industries, for the growth of our cities, for our education and health. And we'll be reminding everyone that it is that small amount of public funding that makes all of these other benefits possible. Thank you.